Everybody, Ken here. I'm filling in for Chris. And his surgery. Thank you, everybody, for supporting the channel. We're grateful. Here, we're going to try something a little bit different. Practice. Infamous and notorious serial. Because, as I'm sure everybody's aware, aside from being a serial killer, as a psychopath, he was also a very convincing and notorious liar. So, and because we don't know how far over he's crossed, we don't quite know what type of answers we're going to get, how truthful they are. We have asked our guides to please help us to ensure that proper protection is in place. Chris is nearby as well. And so with that, let's get started. Thank you for joining us. Hello. I'd like to talk to the spirit of Ted Bundy. Ted, are you there? Theodore?
He's in some shock. I'm supposed to do this. You're on my own. I'm Grace. My name's Grace. I'm trying.
Ted, I'd like to talk to Ted Bundy, please. Ted, are you there?
My name is Grace. This is number one. Snuffers have listening. But I radio me. You know, this is now.
Ted, I just want to know. I want to understand most of what you are. I want you to understand most of what you are saying until I play this back. I won't understand. So I may ask the same questions more than once. Okay?
A lot. Enough.
Okay. Many people have viewed your life with a morbid fascination. There have been many highly viewed television specials about your life and crimes. Do you have any comments regarding this?
Well, it helps to see it. Makes me hold in mind of around it, makes me hold in the easy. On the moment, everything's so the wall was wrong. Feedback. Mostly it's the things that I know you see. The only question I would is
Ted, many people said you've rotten hell. Are you in hell? And if so, what's it like? And if you're not in hell, why?
I know there's no working before the second answer was killed.
Ted, they found you guilty of 20 murders, but you confessed to somewhere around 36. How many people did you actually kill?
We fell down in this federal right, which was very active. We were here, though.
My skin is delicate, powerful, and glowing. I care about what goes on it because of what's within it.
was so busy. His honor had stayed on. You know, we might or something early on. Even this police.
Ted, you referred to an entity or a malignant being that would compel you to commit your crimes. Now that your body's dead, can you tell us more about it and where you are?
This girl and Christmas afternoon, run around. Think about it. When he comes, straight in. But in today's world, we are thinking that after her on these no money has been, you don't need. Say that the one you you've gone against into your head. It's time to be realistic. When after if the no red, I get it. If she awful husband, after all that's happened.
Okay, Ted. There's a second part to this question I want to ask, and because I couldn't hear all of your answer, if it overlaps, could you answer this? Just reiterate your answer, please. Was it so? The entity, was it an actual being, or was it an excuse you made up to protect yourself from legal repercussions, or was it just simply a byproduct of mental illness? There are some who believe that you committed your first murder much earlier in 1961 at the age of 14 when an 8-year-old girl, her name was Anne Marie Burr, she went missing in Tacoma, Washington. Is it true that you killed her? Okay, did you ever ask anyone you murdered for forgiveness after your death? And if you did, what was their reaction? What was your last thought you had just before being executed?
These two words were intended for only Nico and the night. The night is somehow bragging to Nico about doing this.
I'd like all of us in the room here to take a big step back and just let you answer. We were asked to ask you about the little girl.
To really communicate with the night, meaning it's a creation that's always going on. As the English wishing for the battle,
Ted, do you regret anything that you did? Any of the horrible things that you did? Do you have any regret?
The only thing I really care about is when the monster of releasing a mist that that's when you not and one day around us all you know people just
Okay, Ted, is there anything you can tell all of us that would help us to be able to identify and be safe from people like yourself? Thank you for coming to talk to us.
Hi guys! I hope you liked that. Ken was great. He got some really, really amazing responses. I should have more of them. I can't move my other hand, so I'm gonna wait with one hand. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, thumbs up if you liked it. I'll see you on Thursday if you get this before the 26th of August. Yeah, I really love you guys. You're the best subscribers in the world, and you are so, so sweet.
California's next.
When the police finally caught him, people wanted to know everything. He was an avowed Satanist whose crimes didn't just terrify communities, they made him this object of intrigue. So who was Richard Ramirez? By the time he was charged with the Night Stalker murders, Richard was only 25 years old. It's hard to say that any one or two things that happened up until then is what made him a serial killer, but looking back at his life does provide some chilling clues. Richard was born the youngest of 5 children on February 29, 1960 in El Paso, Texas. His mother, Mercedes, worked at a boot factory, and his father, Julian, was an Army veteran who worked on the Santa Fe Railway. He had a violent temper and was away from the family often. With both parents at work, the kids started getting into trouble. Richard's older brother sniffed glue and broke into houses with their cousin Mike, and Richard spent most of his early days with a babysitter or playing in the yard by himself. When he was 2 years old, he was reaching for a radio when a dresser fell on his head, leaving him with 30 stitches and a concussion. 3 years later, Richard was at a playground when a swing knocked him unconscious. He was rushed to the hospital again and sent home with more stitches. In 5th grade, his parents started to worry. Richard was having seizures in class. It's unclear if the head injuries are what caused them, but Richard was diagnosed with epilepsy that school year, and the seizures continued until he was a teenager. Experts say this could be what caused him to have disturbing visions and vivid dreams. 2 years later, those disturbing thoughts took shape. Richard's cousin, Mike, came back from 2 tours in Vietnam. He was a war hero, and Richard idolized him. Mike liked to brag about everything he'd done overseas. He showed Richard the Polaroids he kept of at least 20 women he claimed to have raped and murdered. Mike also taught Richard what he learned as a soldier: stealth, precision, and combat. He wanted him to know how to fight and kill. Meanwhile, Mike's wife, Jessie, hated that he was spending so much time with his young cousin. She wanted him to get a job, and they argued often. One day that May, she came in with groceries, and Mike took out his .38 revolver. She dared him to shoot her, and Mike did, point blank, in front of both his kids and Richard. Mike was arrested, and Richard says that's when he became obsessed with killers, crime, murder, and death. Richard read detective magazines and fantasized about the violent sex acts he saw in Mike's photos. At the same time, his grades slipped. He was hunting, stealing, and getting high, and as punishment he got beatings from his dad. On one of the most brutal nights at home, Richard's father took him to the cemetery and left him chained there for a night. To escape Julian, Richard moved in with his older sister Ruth and her husband Roberto. Roberto was a peeping Tom, and Richard liked going along on his nightly haunts. By the time he was 15, Richard landed a job at the Holiday Inn. A friend gave him a master key to the rooms. He watched people through openings in their curtains, then slip inside once they were asleep to steal valuables. But one night, he wanted more. He hid in the closet while a guest was in the bathroom, then tried to rape her. Her husband walked in and fought him off. Richard was arrested, but the charges were dropped when the couple refused to come back to El Paso to testify. When he was 18, Richard left the city for good. He boarded a Greyhound bus and made the one-way trip to Los Angeles. He started using cocaine, and his string of burglaries grew with his addiction. He spent his time studying maps of the city's freeways and neighborhoods, often driving around and sleeping in stolen cars. One night that summer, a woman downtown asked him to get her some PCP. Later, at her apartment, she turned down his advances, and he brutally raped her. That week marked a shift. Richard found a philosophy that fit his crimes. He started reading books by Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, then stole another car to attend one of LaVey's satanic ceremonies in San Francisco. Afterward, he called his mother, saying he'd been touched by Satan. Richard wasn't back in LA long before he was arrested for auto theft. By the time he was 23, he had lost touch with everyone in his family. When his sister came to look for him in LA, she found Richard at the bus depot, almost unrecognizable. He was living in a motel downtown, still heavily addicted to cocaine. That's where things started to get hazy. Up until 2009, police thought the first Night Stalker murder was in the summer of 1984, but sometime in the months after Richard saw his sister, he made his way back to San Francisco. He was reportedly living out of 2 different hotels in the city's Tenderloin district. 9-year-old May Linda Leung lived in an apartment a few blocks away. Police said May was at the building on April 10th with her 8-year-old brother. He left her alone while she looked for a dollar bill she dropped. When he came back to the basement, he found his sister there, stabbed to death.
9-year-old May Long was found dead in the basement of her apartment building where she lived in the Tenderloin.
Still, even with the evidence, May's murder became a cold case. It wasn't until 3 years later, in 1987, that anyone in the U.S. was convicted of a crime based on DNA. So in 2004, when police reopened May's case, they took another look at the samples, and it turned up a match.
A DNA sample collected in 1984 at the crime scene, they were able to match it with his DNA, Richard Ramirez.
2 months after May Leung's murder, Richard was back in LA, cruising in another stolen car. He was out of cocaine and looking for cash. He stopped at a small building in Glassell Park. The window of apartment 2 was open, so he pried the screen off and climbed inside. The 79-year-old tenant was asleep, but she didn't have anything worth stealing. Richard was enraged. He stood over her bed and stabbed her to death. The victim's son called the police the next day, but Richard hadn't left any fingerprints. For the next 8 months, Richard slipped deeper into his addiction and his conviction for the devil. He was stealing cars, mainlining cocaine, and breaking into houses. But he wanted to keep killing. He quit using and bought a gun. That's when the Night Stalker killings escalated. Over the next 5 months, Richard got increasingly violent, killing at least 14 people and burglarizing, raping, and assaulting others. By August 30th, everyone knew his name
just working.
and his face.
A man by the name of Richard Ramirez.
Police arrested him the next day. What's your name? Richard was convicted of the Night Stalker crimes, and the whole world learned about his satanic worship.
I'm good. I'm doing really well. Thank you for asking.
Sunglasses every day in court. Outside of the trial, he was getting massive amounts of attention for the first time in his life. He had multiple girlfriends at a time, 12 to 15 by some accounts. But then there was Doreen Leoy. She was a 25-year-old magazine editor who believed he was innocent. She wrote him over 75 love letters and was there every day in court. Richard trusted her. She seemed to really care about him, So he proposed to Doreen at the jail.
Thank you.
Judge in Los Angeles today
Check me out on OnlyFans.
Stalker, killer, and rapist to death against him.
After the trial, Richard served most of his time on death row at San Quentin State Prison. He got used to visits from groupies, but in 1992, he got a request from the journalist, Philip Carlo. The two ended up doing over 100 hours of interviews. 4 years later, Carlo published the book, a chilling, comprehensive look at Richard's past. And Richard married Doreen in a death row wedding. Reporters flocked to the prison to ask her how she felt.
Here's the couple, and her response, being the new Mrs. Richard Ramirez.
I'm so happy. I'm so thrilled.
In 2006, the state of California denied Richard's first round of appeals and upheld his death sentence. The following year, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to review his case. Richard died of lymphoma while still on death row at the age of 53, and it left people with lingering questions. Newscasters asked detectives if Richard ever showed remorse for his crimes.
He had no empathy, no feelings, nothing. He wanted to be known as the greatest serial killer that ever lived.
Psychiatrists weighed in too. Dr. Michael H. Stone argued that Richard was a made psychopath and not a born one. Could his childhood of violent trauma and crime be what led him to become the Night Stalker? Richard actually had the same question. In one of his hours-long interviews with Philip Carlo, he asked,
Is there such a thing as a bad seed when a baby is born? Is he already serial killer, already made, or is he created?
It's difficult to say for sure, but Richard did believe environmental factors played a role. He explained it to Inside Edition reporters in 1993.
In a rare interview, Ramirez refused to discuss his own crimes, but had this to say about serial killers.
A serial killer comes about by circumstances like the recipe, poverty, drugs, child abuse. These things, contribute.
There may be some truth to that. A study of mass murderers in 2014 found that more than half had experienced physical or sexual abuse, and like Richard, roughly 1 in 5 killers had sustained a head injury. Of course, none of these things on their own make someone the Night Stalker, but looking back at Richard's life, it's possible to see how one thing led to another, how each year of drugs, abuse, and violent fantasies added up to something bigger, something more monstrous, until Richard Ramirez became this, one of the most brutal serial killers in American history.
To transform your productivity with the revolutionary DeWalt Power Stack battery, the next dimension in power.
The horror began in June 1984, Los Angeles. It was under siege. Death waited in the dark in the hands of a man they called the Night Stalker. After a 14-month reign of terror, he was finally caught. It was only then that his true identity was discovered. His name, Richard Ramirez.
Richard's whole trip was to hide in a tree or hide behind a fence and watch his victims at nighttime and wait into the wee hours of the night. And then, while they slept, creep in, like a coward, and kill them.
The Night Stalker killed at least 13 times, 13 people who were awakened in the night to face death. At least 15 others survived his brutal attacks.
I didn't particularly care for people.
In a rare interview, Ramirez refused to discuss his own crimes, but had this to say about serial killers.
A serial killer comes about by circumstances and like a recipe, poverty, drugs, child abuse. These things, contribute to a person, to a person's frustration and anger, and at some point in life, he explodes.
Perhaps for Richard Ramirez, that anger and frustration turned to rage, which he in turn took out on his victims. His killings were so sadistic and brutal that even experienced detectives were shocked.
He took a woman in her 60s and stomped her to death with his foot, leaving an imprint of a shoe on the side of her face. From that to just executing somebody upon walking into a room after he entered a house. He strangled, he used a ligature, he used a tire iron on a young girl, beat her, left her for dead.
When your anger subsided, if you had to wipe up your mother's blood, I couldn't finish it. I had to leave my brother to finish that chore.
Why on earth would you have hurt those people? Why did you kill those people?
No comments. No comments. I cannot answer it at this time.
What was Richard's motive?
To kill.
That's it?
To kill. It's as simple as that.
Richard Ramirez was raised in El Paso, Texas, the youngest of 5 children born to hard-working, strict parents. Eddie Milam was Richard's best friend back then and remembers when he began to change into a troublemaker.
I did start seeing something going wrong with Ricky Ramirez. I think that really messed him up was the acid. He would do a lot of acid. The stealing, I noticed the stealing, and then started as a peeping Tom, things like that.
Ramirez's passion for burglary earned him the nicknames of Ricky the Thief and Fingers, but Eddie knew Ramirez had other serious problems when he was fired from a local hotel.
He said he was fired, he was dismissed due to the cause that he had tried to molest some 2 little kids that were going up the elevator.
By 18, Ramirez was a high school dropout, drifting around California. He stayed in Skid Row hotels, never seemed to work, but always had the money to buy cocaine. Friends say the Richard Ramirez they knew didn't date and wasn't the type to commit such heinous crimes. But convicted murderer Martin Kipp, who befriended Ramirez in prison, says he heard another side of the night bomb.
Richard told me he needed to associate gruesome violence with sex in order to be completely satisfied. He also told me that he had to violently fantasize about his victims before he could go away sexually gratified.
There are desires, where if I didn't give in to them, I would be crushed by them. I believe in the evil in human nature. This is a wicked world, and in a wicked world, wicked people are born. I'm not going to blame society, my race, people, or anything. It is up to the individual like myself to keep on knocking on whatever door they want to get into.
Because the victims and the methods of killing were so diverse, many experts felt there was no one Night Stalker. Detectives Carrillo and Salerno disagreed and finally broke the case by matching shoe prints. The subsequent trial turned into one of America's most notorious courtroom dramas, punctuated by continual outbursts from Ramirez. In that trial, Ramirez's fascination with Satanism emerged.
As far as Satan is concerned, I believe that, malevolent being, his description eludes me, but I have felt powers that are evil.
After an 8-month trial, Ramirez was convicted of all 13 murders and given multiple death sentences.
I don't care about myself, really. I don't care about what happens to me. I never did, really.
I had these obsessive desires and thoughts wanting to control them, to I don't know how to put it, possess them permanently.
And that's why you killed them.
Right. Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me. And as my obsession grew, I was saving body parts such as skulls and skeletons.
Jeffrey Dahmer is recalling his monstrous past. Almost 2 years ago in this little apartment in Milwaukee, police discovered the grisly remnants of one of the most horrible crime sprees in American history. Jeffrey Dahmer, an unassuming chocolate factory worker, would eventually confess that he had seduced, murdered, and dismembered 17 young men. He even ate some of his victims' body parts. He instantly became the center of worldwide media attention, a serial killer unmasked. There were protests and press conferences in Milwaukee as people tried to understand how this could have happened in their
So, it is about midnight. Candles are lit. Ouija board is out. I want to see what happens if I try to contact one of the most notorious serial killers in all of the United States. Someone who has committed some of the worst crimes known to man. And the man I'm referring to is Theodore Robert Bundy. Ted was a serial killer who has killed numerous women across many states in the 1970s. He has confessed to over 30 murders and is even speculated that he has killed over 100. Bundy was a law student. He had many things going for him. Many described him as charismatic, handsome, intelligent. However, Bundy used this to his advantage to lure the young victims into his clutches. Bundy would fake injuries, he would impersonate authority figures, and just use his charm to gain the trust of his victims. He would then proceed to knock them out, take them to a secluded location, typically rape them, and then strangle them to death. Bundy was eventually caught, however he did escape twice, but he was eventually sentenced to death via the electric chair, and he would die on January 24th, 1989. Now, in just moments, I'm going to try and get a hold of Ted Bundy on the Ouija board and ask him a few questions.
Check out my OnlyFans,
So,
Synika
I'm going to go
Alex.
ahead and
Check
get
out my
started.
Instagram, Synika
Everything's
Alex,
set up.
Goddess Synika.
I'm ready.
Check out my
mentally.
SoundCloud, Goddess
So let's just see
Synika,
what
Kizuzu.
happens. Disclaimer, I cannot guarantee the results.
YouTube,
This is a
Synika,
Ouija
Aaliyah,
board. You
Star,
really never know who
Lawson,
you're actually
Synika
talking
Alex.
to. It could be just another person. Could be like some demonic entity. It could be something you don't even know exists. There's no way of knowing. All I'm going to do is just evaluate the answers and just see if it seems like something you would say and just kind of go with it that way. But I cannot guarantee that it's actually him. Alright, so I changed it up a bit. I'm using a full spectrum camera right now instead of just a regular camera. So let's go ahead and start. Ouija, Ouija, are you there? Ouija, Ouija, are you there? Ouija, Ouija, are you there? Yes. May I speak to Theodore Robert Bundy? He was born in Burlington, Vermont, November 4th, 1996, or 1946. And he died January 24th, 1989, in the Florida State Prison. H I. Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Are you Theodore Robert Bundy?
.352 Lake County,
Are you
Orange
Theodore?
County, Apopka,
Just meant a
Altamont.
goodbye. I guess that's not him. And whoever it was must not want anything to do with him. That was weird. That was cool, though. Oh, man. That was interesting. Alright. I'm gonna try again. Let's see.
Check out my OnlyFans.
L A N C E Lance. Do you know? Lance, do you know Theodore Robert Bundy? Do you know him in any way? No. So it's been pretty quiet so far on here. Really only one session so far has had an actual coherent spirit speaking to me, but they just ended the session right away, immediately as they brought up his name. But I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to keep on trying. Hopefully I get something. Whoa, something just fell. That was part of the candle. My God, that scared me. Oh man, not a good time to be doing that. Holy shit. Piece of wax. Ouija, are you there?
Ouija, are you here?
Yes. May I speak to Theodore Robert Bundy? He was born in Burlington, Vermont, November 4th, 1946. He died January 24th, 1999 in the Florida State Prison. Are you Theodore Bundy? Am I speaking to Ted Bundy?